Welcome to episode 1 of From Timber Falls with Love, your little dose of romance in the midst of daily life. I'm your host, Fiona West. I'm an author, wife, mom, and teacher, and I'm here to give you a peek into what's happening in your favorite small town. Today I've got a short story called When All This Is Over, which is narrated by Dr. Kyle Durand, one of the main characters from Must Be a Mistake in my Timber Falls series, and he is by far everyone's favorite hero. I never thought I would write quarantine fiction of any kind. It just didn't feel right to me. I didn't want to feel like I was profiting off of other people's pain or making light of something serious. But the more I thought about it, while I didn't want to invite the pandemic into my novels, I did want to know how my characters were coping. And I wanted to give a voice to some things that a lot of us are feeling and thinking. So I put the idea out to my newsletter, and they liked it, and they wanted Kyle's perspective, which I was delighted to provide. So here we are, in 2020, a year of many firsts. Please enjoy this quarantine fiction set in the Timber Falls universe, which will ever so briefly intersect with real life. July 2020. This was a bad idea, Kyle muttered, crossing his arms over his chest as he surveyed the people congregating in the grassy area. Ainsley grinned at him, kissing his shoulder. "No, it's not. We can do it. We're being careful." He pointed the digital thermometer at her temple and took her temperature again. Still normal. The minute it changed, they were leaving. He knew it didn't work that way, but it was making him feel better. She patted his arm as she moved back toward the food. It should be safe for her to refill her plate. Everyone was seated, chatting, laughing. Their friends sat in a circle in Daniel and Winnie's backyard, paper plates balanced on their knees, all of them more than 6 feet apart. Except... "Hey!" Kyle snapped. "You! Too close!" Daniel grimaced guiltily. He'd been shuffling closer to the others again, and he clearly knew it. "I can't hear what everyone's saying," he complained over the soft sound of the Santiam River at the edge of the property. Kyle narrowed his eyes. "You know the rules." His brother sighed. "This is my house, you know. It's my party. You're just providing the location. My yard isn't big enough." Kyle watched his uber-social brother pout, and he took a calming breath in and out of his nose. Why had he agreed to this? He reminded himself not to talk to Ainsley during sex. It distracted the logical centers of his brain. One moment he'd been kissing her, relishing the feel of her fingers unbuttoning his shirt, and the next he heard himself breathlessly agreeing to host a socially distanced backyard barbecue for her. They'd only been married a few weeks, and the novelty of the act had definitely not worn off yet. But now, without teaching or wedding planning, she was stir-crazy, apparently. He couldn't fathom why. If he had a socially appropriate reason to stay home all day, he'd be delighted. Instead, he'd been pressed into extra shifts at the hospital. "Fine," Kyle consented. "Daniel moves to the middle of the circle. Everyone else takes one big step back to compensate." Everyone ignored him, engrossed in their conversations. Maybe Ainsley wasn't the only one in need of more social interaction in real life. "Kyle gave us directions," Lizzie Painter said, standing up, going into deputy mode, using a "this is not a request" tone of voice. "Everyone make the circle bigger. Come on." Hastily, their friends did as they were told, and he let out a deep breath, feeling the tension in his belly fizzle. He nodded at Lizzie gratefully, who gave him a nod in return. At least someone here had a sense of order and discipline. The river rushed by, ignoring all of them in lieu of its own destiny. Robins sang to them as evening fell, but the group didn't notice. They were just so happy to be together again. Daniel flopped down into the grass, looking up at the sky. "I feel like I've been inside since February," he mused, staring up at the sky, which was putting on a show with sherbet pinks and oranges. "You have been inside since February," Ainsley replied, carefully removing a chunk of meat from her kebab, which had been expertly grilled by Kyle. "You're inside all winter most years, but this year did feel completely abnormal." "I guess I should amend that," he said. "I've been at the hospital since February." "I feel the same," said Winnie. "Well, I should amend that. I feel like I've been working since February. So many home births. So many." She nibbled a piece of watermelon delicately. At least you can see people face to face. It's really tough teaching people to read when half of them don't have reliable internet, and the other half are bouncing around in front of the screen wanting to show you their loose tooth and their cat rather than listen to a lesson. Sorry we're late, Martina sang from behind her leopard print mask, setting down a foil-covered platter. I had to get Willow to bed, but we brought dessert. Kyle stopped the couple. Hello, temp check. He assumed they were both smiling behind their masks. Thanks for inviting us, Carter said, as Kyle pointed his thermometer at Martina, who lifted her hair away from her temple. Normal. I would say it's my pleasure, but it's really not. I was roped into this, Kyle explained as he shifted to Carter's temple. However, I am glad you could attend and hope you'll suffer no ill effects. Normal. Enjoy the food. What kind of dessert? Called Ainsley. Cupcakes, Martina grinned. And before you ask, no, I didn't bake them. Mrs. Sanchez is feeling a little cooped up living with us, so she was happy to provide them and says to say hello to you all. Then you're forgiven, called Greg. Kyle noted that despite the smiles coming from Greg and Martina, Carter was frowning at the interaction. Strange. Someone coughed, and Kyle whipped his head around to see who it was so fast he gave himself a crick in his neck. It was his brother Philip, who appeared to be choking on a baby carrot. Just to be safe, once he'd safely cleared the blockage from his airway, Kyle went over and suddenly scanned his forehead again. Normal. At least it's nice outside, Carter said, pulling a beer out of the cooler. Kyle brought them 2 canvas camping chairs, and they thanked him, carefully avoiding actual physical contact. You may take your turn at the food table whenever you'd like, he said briskly. All the others have already eaten. What if I want seconds? Daniel asked from his back, clearly relishing the twilight sky. Tough. My party, my rules. Ainsley rubbed his arm as if to say, chill, dude, then kissed him on the cheek, what little of it she could find around his mask. No Tarushi? Martina asked, and Greg shook his head. Kyle had made the intern's schedule, so he already knew where Dr. Udawate was before her roommate announced it. Working. It felt like that was all he did lately. Eat, sleep, and work. How's it going? Asked Ainsley carefully, turning to her best friend. Sheltering with Charlie, too. Kyle had the same question. When had he gotten so nosy? Ainsley was rubbing off on him, and not in a good way. But Starla's divorce had been difficult, and he wondered how they were getting along, living together again. Not as bad as I feared, Starla answered, munching a homemade French fry. She was monopolizing 2 chairs in order to put her feet up, and Kyle thought she looked eminently relieved to be kid-free. Well, except for the one she was gestating, but he didn't count in utero people. When it's Charlie's turn for the kids, I just go over to Sawyer's. He doesn't seem to mind. Yeah, I bet he doesn't, Kyle thought, but he quickly wiped the smirk off his face when Starla glared at him over her glasses. When all this is over, what are you going to do? Ainsley asked no one in particular in an artless attempt to change the subject. I'm going to hug every student at the elementary school. No, wait, I'm going to hug everyone in Timber Falls. I'm going to make a spreadsheet so I don't miss anyone. I'm going shopping for baby stuff in Portland, somewhere classy, Starla said, thoughtfully munching a carrot stick. Then I'm going to throw open the library doors and let all the kids come in and touch whatever they want. She'd been delivering books to people's homes, but Kyle knew it was difficult for her to not have patrons in the library. He'd overheard her saying so during her weekly call with Ainsley. Even his house felt small when there were so many digital conversations going on. I'm going to hike the falls, Martina said, and all eyes turned to her. The falls had been closed since March, as the town council feared having groups of people passing each other on the narrow trails without masks. Summer always brought massive groups to the falls. You? Hiking? Her fiancé teased. Kyle, take her temperature again. I think she's feverish after all. My instrument is accurate, Kyle assured him. He ignored the knowing smiles that spread around the circle like a wave. I mean it, Martina said. I haven't done it in years, but I love it up there. I don't think I knew I wanted to until I couldn't anymore. Kyle wondered if they'd officially canceled their wedding. Yet, if they hadn't, they should. Sentimentality was not a luxury the town could afford right now. I want expensive restaurant food, Winnie said, her pink cotton mask puffing as she released a longing sigh. I want to sit down to candlelight and linen tablecloths and eat things I'd never be able to produce myself. I want the ambiance. Amen. To food we didn't cook ourselves, Ainsley said, holding her glass high, and the others imitated the gesture in silent solidarity. Did anyone else try sourdough? All I managed to produce was mold, Lizzie said, dropping her empty plate onto the grass and tucking her hands under her legs. Oh, I can give you some starter, Martina said. Even I had trouble, and I know all kinds of ferments. It was a tricky one with all the moisture in the air. What about you? Ainsley said softly, turning to Kyle. She threaded her arm through his, resting her temple against his shoulder. What are you going to do when all this is over? Kyle considered his wife's question. There were things that he missed, of course. A general freedom that was notably absent at the moment, a general ease in the pit of his stomach. The fear of which of the older people was most susceptible, the pain of losing timber rights to something so preventable. I'm going to run a marathon. His own answer surprised him, but as he plumbed his own soul, it sounded right. It was true. She lifted her head, her cute nose wrinkling. Really? I thought you said marathon training was too hard on the body. It is, he nodded in agreement, but so is chronic stress, and I really would enjoy the achievement at least once in my life. It feels shorter than it did before. Life, I mean. Yeah, she whispered, snuggling deeper into him. At least he had her. In all this, he had Ainsley. She might push him, but it was healthy for the most part. Maybe not her Lord of the Rings obsession, but... He put his hand over hers, rubbing his thumb over her knuckles. If he infected her... Kyle shuddered. He couldn't even think about that right now, even though he knew she'd probably come out of it fine on the other end. The feel of her skin had his mind wandering in a more pleasant direction anyway. His nerves were frayed, even from this limited interaction, and he knew just the remedy for that. Let's go home, he said. 20 more minutes, she asked, and he couldn't say no to her pleading gaze. 15, and I want you to sanitize your hands again. He held out the bottle, and she dutifully put her palms under the pump and received the liquid. The smell of it helped him relax, weirdly enough. Maybe you should help me shower when we get home, she murmured, low enough that no one else could hear, distant as they were. You know, just to make sure I'm extra clean. Let's go home, he repeated insistently, unable to keep the gravel out of his voice. 15. You promised. He raised the thermometer to scan her temple again, and she laughed, pushing him away. Quit that. Oh, he said with faux concern. You're feverish. Time to go home and put you to bed. I am not, she protested, backing away. He lengthened his stride to catch up with her. Would he ever want to stop chasing her? But she turned and ran around the edge of the circle, laughing. When he caught her, he was going to tug her down the steep rocky bank by the river and kiss her where no one would see them. He was going to carry her through his brother's backyard like a fireman, back to the car. Let Daniel play host. It was his house, after all. Kyle was going to take her home and show her all the reasons her happiness was worth the risk of even a small social gathering as this. But first he'd have to catch her. Well, it was good preparation for his marathon, anyway. This podcast is going to be all sorts of things, I hope. It's always going to be short and sweet because #momlife. It's always going to be a place for us to share stories and discuss questions and laugh over human nature. And I would honestly love to hear from you. If you have a question you want answered on the show, you can send me a voice message on Anchor. Navigate to anchor.fm/FromTimberFallsWithLove. No spaces. And it's Anchor like on a ship. Click the button that says message, and I'll try to include it on a future show. Or if you're like me and you don't want to learn how to do one more technological thing, send me an email at fiona@fionawest.net. You can also support the show financially on Anchor. Book 4 in the Timber Falls series will be out soon. More Than We Bargained For is Starla and Sawyer's book, and I'll give you a little preview of it next time, so watch out for that. If you need more Timber Falls in the meantime, you can find Daniel and Winnie's story, Could Be Something Good, as an ebook on Amazon or in paperback at most independent bookstores. I'm Fiona West, signing off. Happy reading, book buddies.